Alright, today we're having a look at Ruins of the Forgotten Temple by Scroongebap. Alright, so here we are in Ruins of the Forgotten Temple by Scroongebap, and it is an LBP 1 level, but one that has been published pretty recently, just within the last week. And I do notice, with some trepidation, that there are no completions listed on the level out of the 26 plays that it's gotten. So I'm a bit worried about that, but we're going to do our best. I'm really liking some of the lighting effects here, and relatively impressed considering that a lot of times LBP 3 doesn't really handle LBP 1 lighting very well. So I'm glad that they've gotten it to pull off. Hi! I'm glad that Scroongebap was able to pull off the lighting. I have never liked springs. I just not a fan of the springs. Okay, we got a little bit of old school timer. I want to say electronics, but it's logic, timer logic going on down there. That's pretty cool. It's taken a bit of a while to do it though, so that's a thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm digging it. I'm digging what we've got. Lisa's got a nice look. I don't know if I needed necessarily to have the jetpack. But, again, I'm not a... Hi... Well, no, that's interesting. I can see a high score from Scroongebap in the corner there, so I wonder why it's listed as not having any completions. I mean... Okay. Okay. Nice! Not nice. Oh, come on! That is... Really? I mean, maybe we've got to go at full speed to let the, let our momentum carry us away from the electrified ground. That is not... nice. Okay. No, that was not nice. Blarg, you've never obtained the riches of the Forgotten Temple, and I will make sure of that. Will you now? Will you actually? Okay. Camera angle could be a little bit better here to make it a little bit. What just happened? What did you say? Yeah. What was the other thing you said? No. Okay. Not gonna work it for us. That's fine. Can I bop those? There we go. Interesting choice of music. Can we actually get up that top one? Yes. Oh bother. Oh bother, said Pooh as he was destroyed and defeated. We done did it. Congrats to us. Okay. That's... Oh, crumbs. We're gonna get locked off. We're not gonna be able to get this full score because we triggered the scoreboard. Really good timing, though. And, woo! We're number 1. We're gonna talk about this back at the hub. We'll see you there. See yas. And we're back. And Ruins of the Forgotten Temple by Scroongebap. And I'd say it is a softer yellow square, but it's a fairly decent and fun level. It's certainly not a bad level and doesn't really have any major flaws. Now, as we mentioned in the video, it is an LBP 1 level, and I really appreciated the fact that it wasn't broken. We know from levels that we played in the past that sometimes LBP 1 doesn't translate very well to LBP 3. You get problems with lighting, sometimes things don't load in right, and sometimes those levels are uncompletable, but that is not the case here. You'll be able to have the full experience from start to finish without any worries, even if you're playing an LBP 3. And the full experience is pretty much like we saw in the video. It's roughly 3 minutes long, probably a little bit less than that, depending on if you get caught up in the corridor, which we can talk about in a minute. And I generally had a nice time kind of going back to that design aesthetic from LBP 3. We can see some nods to that with the exposed logic like we saw on the rotating bit there. Rotating bit was a little bit slow, to be perfectly honest, but just the fact that that old school style of timer was in the level, I really appreciated it. And I always love to see kind of physics-based logic and exposed logic elements. I think that can be really fun. Something I really enjoyed about the level, I thought that kind of stood out for me, was the way that lighting was handled. There's a lot of lighting changes in the level. Some of them are triggered when you're grabbing on things like the swinging lanterns. You grab on those swinging lanterns, then it'll trigger a light change, and that I thought was a really cool effect, and it made a level that probably without that would have looked a little bit too bland. And it made it gave it a little bit of flavor, and then I thought that was well done by ScrunchBap. Now, the gameplay, there's not really too much there that's going to be an issue that's going to trip you up, except for the corridor we're going to talk about really soon. One thing that I mentioned in the video, that I'm not a really big fan of springs in obstacles and kind of the forced trampoline style jumping. I always have my own personal problems with that. I just don't seem to really nail the rhythm of the jump there, but this one wasn't too bad. But something that I did notice about that was that once you pass it, it'll break, and I'll have to check in the footage, but see, there's a checkpoint that needs to be triggered, and if the break happens before the checkpoint's triggered and you somehow end up getting yourself killed, then that makes that section unpassable. But we'll see what it looks like in the pips. Now the big kind of downside of the level is that jetpack corridor. It's well more difficult than anything that's come before it in the level. It's well more difficult than anything that's going to come after it in the level, so it doesn't really seem to fit the flow of the level, and it's really, really easy to die there. Now, it's just that one section, but when you find yourself doing it over and over and over again, because you've got to rush through it. You can't just kind of go slowly to line yourself up, make sure you're not going to touch the floor or the ceiling, because that will drop you actually onto the floor when you lose the jetpack. So you've got to be going at top speed. You've got to have your bearing set pretty precisely. And yeah, I mean, it was just, it was a bit frustrating, and I don't think was entirely necessary, to be perfectly honest. The boss as well, I mean, it was kind of cute, and it certainly wasn't very difficult. The music change in that section I thought was a little bit unusual and didn't really necessarily fit what was being presented. Maybe something a little bit heavier for a boss fight would have been better, but you know, it's cute, and it's certainly not nearly as annoying as the jetpack section was. And that basically wraps it up. You get to the end. There's the scoreboard there. We see the clot of bubbles that was often found in LBP 1 levels. So this, even though it was made in 2019, is still keeping with that aesthetic fairly strongly. And like a lot of these where the bubbles are placed on the scoreboard area, it's really easy to trigger the scoreboard before you've actually gotten most or all of the bubbles. You kind of actually have to pause there and let them fall your way to pick them up. That's only really if you care about the score. It's not really that big a deal, but you know, such is life. Now, as I mentioned in the video, and I took a look at how many times the level was cleared, because I was a little bit worried going in as to whether or not it was actually clearable in LBP3, and we saw that there weren't any clears on there. I don't know if it didn't count as ScrunchBap's completion, because they actually completed the level. Their score is on the scoreboard, but no one else has. And I would, if I had to guess, I would say that the majority of the non-completions that we're seeing are due to the jetpack section. I think that's probably grinding out players, and that they're maybe giving it 2 or 3 shots and then just saying to heck with it and bouncing out. So that's probably where the most polish needs to be done. But you know, all in all, at the end of the day, I had myself a good time with it, and I do think, even though it is a soft yellow square, I do think it is a yellow square. So, give Ruins of the Forgotten Temple a shot and see what you think about it. This is our first episode of 2020. I hope that your New Year's treated you well, that you didn't drink too much, you didn't have a hangover, and that 2020 will continue to see you well treated. You're all wonderful people, and I appreciate all the support and all the feedback that you give me. So that does it for us here this go about. So from Risco here in Osaka, to all of you out there wherever you may happen to be, thank you. Arigato, sayonara, see you, and ciao.